When analyzing a piece of literature, you can look at it from different ways. You can focus on the language, you can focus on what it means, and you can just read it for fun. Now, there are also certain approaches you can take to analyzing a piece of literature. In this video, I'm going to cover the context approach. Now, the first thing you want to look at is the context approach. And the context approach basically focuses on the context of the piece of literature that you are analyzing. And this means that you look at the context surrounding the literary work. And that could be the time in which it was written, the person who wrote it, the situation under which the text was written, and maybe a societal context that might be important for the meaning of the text. And we do this because literature reflects the world that we live in. And if you look at the life of the author and the time in which it was written, you gain a deeper understanding of the text and what everything means in that particular text. So the context approach focuses on the context in which it was written. Sometimes this context could be something new and something that we're not familiar with in our contemporary times, especially if you look at very old pieces of text or texts that were written during a tumultuous time in history. Think about war poetry, for example, or poetry of the 1960s. When you look at the context approach, you learn to better understand the world in which it was written, and you learn to understand more about the author and what the author wanted to achieve with their text. I'm going to show you what you need to look at regarding the context approach, and I'm going to do this using a song. Because everybody listens to music, using a song is a very easy way to start practicing literary analysis. I'm going to use the song Dear Mr. President by Pink, and I'm going to show you what you need to look at regarding the context approach. So this is Dear Mr. President by Pink. And if we look at the context approach, we need to answer a few questions before we can actually start analyzing the song. The first thing that you want to look at is Pink herself. So you need to look at the singer Pink and basically think about what she finds important. She's someone who writes particular songs about particular topics, and all of her songs have a particular meaning. And we want to know what she wants to achieve with her songs. So in this case, the first thing that you want to do is do an analysis of Pink and the things that she stands for. Then you want to look at when the song was written. Now in this case, this song is from 2006. And since it covers a president, it might be useful to look at who the president is at that time. So we know that in 2006, George Bush Jr. was president. So this is probably something about his administration, and it probably covers things that were important in America at that time. That might also be something to look at. What was important for the people of America in 2006, and how does Pink comment on those things using this song? Now, when you start reading the song and you listen to the song, you might find a few other things that might need a bit of analysis before we can actually talk about the meaning of the song. Now, don't forget, the meaning of the song is not the thing that we're doing now. We do that with the text approach. So when we think about the context, we need to think about 2006, we need to think about Pink and what she stands for and what she finds important, and we need to think about George W. Bush, because why was he a president that she felt she had to write a song about? Now those are things that you need to research to understand the context in which the song was written. There are also a few things in the text that we might want to look at regarding the context, and I'm going to point out a few things that I found interesting in this song. Now there's one thing I'm going to add that I think is important and we need to know regarding Mr. President Bush. We know that President Bush was a Republican president, and we know that Republican presidents are rather conservative. And we already see these conservative ideas in the song text. We find, for example, the following line, if we scroll down: what kind of father would take his own daughter's rights away? And what kind of father might hate his own daughter if she were gay? So remember that I mentioned that Republican presidents are rather conservative, and these lines confirm those ideas. I think, and we're kind of moving ahead a bit, that these are things that she wants to criticize because she's not a conservative person. She's criticizing probably abortion rights in the US, and she might say a few things about gay rights in the US as well. And those are the things that we get from these lines in the text. We also need to know more about George W. Bush to understand this particular line. You've come a long way from whiskey and cocaine. And this might be something that you need to research a bit deeper to understand what Republican presidents and sometimes even Democratic presidents did when they were young in their youth at their very prestigious schools to understand what this line particular means. So in the context approach, you're going to look at things that are relevant to understand the meaning of the song, and you need to put the song in its particular time and its particular place. Now you'll figure out as you move along that sometimes you need to go back from context to text, from text to context, from context to language, from language to text. And the reason that you need to do this is because to understand the context, you need to know what you need to look for. An example of this is the following line. In this song, we have the line, "How can you say no child is left behind?" Now, even though we might not think that this is a very important line, it is a way that she's also criticizing the President Bush administration. President Bush signed the No Child Left Behind Act in the early 2000s, and this was something that was done to improve education in the United States and to make sure that everyone, even those less fortunate, got the same level of education. Now, the No Child Left Behind Act is rather criticized, and the reason for this is that even though it made sure that every child got the same education, it did turn the focus from learning to tests in the United States because it introduced new standardized testing. So that's a different way to criticize No Child Left Behind, and it probably doesn't have to do anything with this particular song, but it is something that you need to research when you're thinking about the context approach. So again, the context approach focuses on the context of the song, and it focuses on when the song was written, who wrote the song, and what was important in society at that time. Now, when you're doing a context analysis, make sure that you dive as deeply as possible into the context of the song. You want to figure out what was important at the time, and you want to dive in these things as deeply as possible, because the more you know about the time in which a particular piece of work was written, the easier it will become to understand all of the details of the text. And this is useful because you need those details when you're doing the text approach. So in this case, regarding Pink, we want to look for things about Pink herself. We want to know what kind of music she writes. We want to know what she finds important. You want to know a bit about 2006 and what was important in the US in 2006. You want to look for President Bush and see what his administration was and what he stood for as president. And you might want to look into Republican and some conservative ideas that shine through this particular song. So, to summarize, the context approach focuses on the context in which a particular song or literary work was written. And you want to look at that context as broadly as possible so that you can understand as much of that particular piece of work as possible as well. So this is how you do the context approach when doing a literary analysis.